Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar, and thanks for joining us. I acknowledge I'm hosting tonight's webinar on the land of the Gadigal people who are part of the Eora Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands you are on. We pay our respect to the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the lands on which we live, learn and work. We recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and sky, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Their lands have never been ceded. As mentioned a short while ago, if you can keep yourselves on mute, that would be great. And any questions or comments, or questions, put them in the chat box for our speakers to respond to, probably at the end of the presentations. Thanks. And tonight's meeting will be recorded for those unable to join us now. And so kicking us off tonight is the wonderful Lisa Ryan. She's Animal Liberation's Regional Campaign Manager, and she'll be updating everyone on Animal Liberation's work in keeping the greyhound racing industry on its knees. She'll be addressing the recent spate of exposés, our recent and upcoming submissions, and how we will need your help in 2024 to stop 5 new proposed tracks in New South Wales. So if there are champions listening and watching tonight, champions for greyhounds, Lisa will make available any of the slides that she's sharing with us tonight. So over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I'm going to share some slides. Can everybody see that clearly?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay,
yep.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I would also like to acknowledge Australia's First Nations people, the original and true custodians of the lands on which we all meet tonight, lands that were never ceded. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may have joined us. Before I begin the presentation, I also wanted to acknowledge and thank my colleagues, Alex and Nadia in particular, for their support with the work I do, and Linda's leadership and the support from our board. It wouldn't be possible without people agreeing to some of the campaign strategies we come up with. I would also like to acknowledge the incredible people we collaborate with around Australia and across the globe, including the team from the Coalition for the Protection of Greyhounds, who have the level of expertise, and without their data and dedicated work, we wouldn't be able to raise awareness and run our campaigns as effectively as we do. Also important to acknowledge to volunteers that I've had the privilege of working with for a number of months, Andrew and Mitchell, who have been instrumental in allowing us to expand the work we're doing for greyhounds, and both are phenomenal people, and the more volunteers we get, the more work we can do. So thank you to them. Tonight, my presentation is going to cover a snapshot of the industry. I want to talk a little bit about the culture and the systemic issues in greyhound racing Australia-wide, and these are global issues. Also speak about some of the recent exposures and some of the developments that have come from those exposures. And then finishing off with what we're doing at Animal Liberation to try and keep the industry on its knees, and various ways members of the public can help us achieve where we're going. So some of the information I'll be sharing is very damning, and some of it makes people angry. but I hope to finish off with what will be a sense of optimism and hope that there are many of us around the world working for the same cause. We are making little steps forward, even though we've got a huge challenge in front of us in New South Wales and across Australia. But we are very optimistic that if we continue to work together, we can eventually see an end to greyhound racing and the carnage on our tracks and the exploitation of these beautiful dogs. So to begin with, just a little bit about the industry's culture, and a lot of people are aware of some aspects, but I guess what we've seen in recent years is that it's always taken a horrible incident like live baiting being caught by animal activists and becoming public to create the momentum for state governments and the industry to try and clean up the mess. And in New South Wales in particular, we've had a number of inquiries that have brought to the surface the most damning of information and distressing information. But what has come forward in all of these inquiries has been happening for decades. And it takes an incident and something to anger the public to get the government to listen. There has been, and there continues to be, a lack of transparency, and an obvious example is when greyhounds are racing, those races are filmed by Greyhound Racing New South Wales. You can access them. Instantly, there is an injury which often becomes a serious injury and leads to a greyhound being euthanized. Greyhound Racing New South Wales immediately removed that footage. That smacks of lack of transparency. Greyhound Racing New South Wales, and this is from my own experience, are also very reluctant to respond to emails from Animal Liberation or to collaborate with the sharing of information, even if it's in the interest of the greyhounds. We have a situation in New South Wales where we have Greyhound Racing New South Wales, and because they were forced by government, we have an independent regulator, the Greyhound Welfare and Integrity Commission, who are supposed to look after welfare of greyhounds and integrity of the industry. Our view has always been, and we will continue to push this, is that because GWIC, the regulator, are responsible for the welfare of greyhounds, they should be responsible for the rescue, the rehabilitation and the rehoming of greyhounds too, rather than allowing it to continue to sit with the commercial industry. And Greyhound Racing New South Wales' job is about the commercial viability, making more money, gaining more sponsorships, increasing gambling revenue. That is their focus. I think it's also important to say that for us to achieve anything, we need to continue professional relationships with all of these industry organisations. And we do that probably more with GWIC than Greyhound Racing New South Wales. And it's not the people that work in these industries that is our target. Our target is the racing of greyhounds, the forced racing of greyhounds and the carnage on the tracks, and the suffering and the killing and the live baiting and the gambling. So we have pretty good relationships with GWIC staff who I have found very helpful. And when I raise a question, I normally get a very prompt answer. So that's a positive, and we will continue to nurture that relationship. Basically, the industry is about forcing greyhounds to run for gambling profits. But there are spin-offs as well. There is overbreeding that continues. There are greyhounds that are bought, swapped or sold to other participants for commercial profits. There are greyhounds that are used exclusively for breeding more litters and trying to achieve the perfect greyhound, which doesn't exist. And there are those that seek to breed to export because there is a very lucrative export market overseas in particular countries. At the moment, so these beautiful dogs are still very much, in spite of their claims, viewed as commercial commodities for profit, whether it's racing, breeding, or export. At the moment, and this is something that we do need to get on top of, and we will continue to advocate, they are breeding 6 times more than they can be placed or rehomed. So this is an unacceptable situation, particularly at the moment where we know our pounds and shelters are absolutely busting at the seams, and yet, in spite of all the money the greyhound industry has, including their own rescue and rehoming arm, greyhounds as pets, who receive many millions of dollars to operate, there are still greyhounds ending up in New South Wales pounds and other pounds and shelters as well. And unfortunately, in spite of GWIC being a statutory body who are subject to freedom of information and all sorts of other requirements, they recently produced and issued a new code of practice, which, if a participant doesn't want a greyhound anymore and they've tried to rehome that greyhound, if they get permission for the regulator, they can actually dispose of that greyhound into a pound and shelter. Now, we have certainly put our views to GWIC very strongly that that is unacceptable at the moment, given the millions of dollars the industry has, given they have an absolute moral obligation to rehome ethically and responsible these dogs. The other thing that concerned us very much when this new code of practice came out is that with any other code of practice in New South Wales, be it for a duck farm or puppy farm dogs or any other species of animal, it would normally go out on public exhibition and there would be an opportunity to have public input. In spite of GWIC now being funded by every New South Wales taxpayer, they were able to produce and issue as a done deal this new code of practice, which still allows greyhounds to end up in pounds. Because I also oversee Animal Lib's Pound and Shelter Reform campaign, and you will all be familiar with our exposure of Burke Council pound, my concern every time I come across a greyhound in a pound and then report it back to GWIC is, what if this greyhound ends up in the wrong pound and it's killed without getting a fair chance of a new home, or it ends up in a pound that is still shooting? So there's some of the issues with the industry. We also know that the industry is rife with lots of bad apples, and I will show you some data a little further on to demonstrate that, because we are tracking it. But they also, there is this inbuilt culture where they can do what they want. The government's really not going to jump on them. They've been doing it for years, and that is this culture of connected with drugging, criminal activities, and all sorts of horrible things. So even though there's been inquiry after inquiry, even though we've got an independent regulator, from our perspective, and I think probably from the coalition's perspective, these same entrenched issues keep reappearing time and time again. I guess I also wanted to just touch briefly on the dogs we're talking about and the life they experience. So there is the overbreeding, as I explained earlier. And these greyhounds are basically in kennels for, 23 out of 24 hours a day, sometimes more. They are conditioned. So the greyhound industry refers to training them. They're actually conditioned from a certain age. They're put onto training tracks and they're taught to chase. Now, most of us who've had dogs in our lives know that a dog will chase a toy or a tennis ball. Some dogs have a prey drive, but these greyhounds are, the conditioning is reinforced over and over and over again. And their exercise in the majority of instances is not going for a walk, to a local park or going for a swim. Their exercise is being tied up to an exercise machine where they have no control whether they want to participate or not. And they're put onto these machines to keep their muscles moving so that they can go back out on the track. The kenneling is one of the welfare issues, and also the isolation. So they are, sometimes you will come across a facility where there might be two in together as company, but often they're in individual, often substandard kennels, and they're not being socialized. So they're not having experiences normal dogs have. That then leads to problems down the track if they survive racing and they get the opportunity to be adopted into a new home, and yet the experiences are all frightening for them and something that some of them really struggle with. There is also ongoing drugging with prohibited substances, and GWIC's own reports confirm that, and we have some data a bit further on. There is a lack of vet care with many of these dogs. The ones that are past racing are just, a lot of them are just languishing in these kennels until they're handed over or they're given to the industry's own rescue groups. There has certainly been an increase in the number of races around Australia, including New South Wales. And one of the concerns we have, but there hasn't been enough scientific study into it, is the cumulative injury damage. So if a greyhound pulls up sore at the end of a race and the vet says it has to have a 2 to 3 week spell, unless another vet looks at that, you don't really know whether in 2 to 3 weeks, and they're brought back to race again, that injury has properly healed, and that racing again within a short period of time is actually re-flaring up that injury, which may be very painful for individual dogs. I've already touched on the overbreeding, but the wastage factor refers to this industry breeding and breeding and breeding, and only a few dogs being suitable by their assessment for racing, and the rest of them are rehomed with their friends or their family, or they're referred to the industry's rescue group, or they're referred to all our self-funded volunteer rescue groups who are just inundated at the moment. The injuries and deaths, I have some data in a couple of slides further on, so I won't cover that. The exports issue is probably the one for me, apart from the injuries and deaths, that upsets me the most, because when these dogs are exported to even so-called safe countries, they can be re-exported. And we know a lot of them end up in countries like China, where there are no animal welfare protections for these beautiful dogs, and we are utterly powerless to do anything about it. Once they leave Australia, we have no power. I am aware of one very, very special Australian greyhound who was bred in New South Wales, who will be coming home early next year. and we will all be celebrating that, because it is very difficult to get these dogs out of some of these countries, and they don't live long. Live baiting, and we know this from the exposures that continue to happen around the country by numerous groups that we collaborate with, is still happening. And I have no doubt that it's still happening in New South Wales. It will be, I guess, one of those, a matter of time. On average, a greyhound is killed every 3 days on Australian tracks, and 31 are injured every day. The off-track deaths, which is where a greyhound is seriously injured at a race, but the participant who owns the greyhound, and they are owned as pieces of property, will take it to another vet and it will be killed after the race. So that is what an off-track death is, and they are difficult to track, because the coalition have to rely on quarterly reports to put all that information together. But the on-track deaths, those deaths we can take from the race stewards' reports. We get them pretty much straight away, and the coalition do an amazing job pulling that data together constantly, so it's up to date. But because the injuries and the deaths are so huge, unacceptably huge, these numbers are changing literally every day or every second day. Between January up until the current time, in New South Wales, we've had 39 on-track deaths and 11 off-track deaths. So New South Wales is still ranking as the worst state. Nationally, there have been 105 on-track deaths. The numbers are absolutely unacceptable, and I think what the message we need to get to our decision makers is, if these death numbers and injury numbers were happening with any other species, say at a dog show or a walking event, and these numbers were coming up, we know the government would act quickly. But because they're greyhounds who make money, and the government also makes money because of the gambling taxes, it's like they continue to try and push it under the carpet. These numbers are abhorrent, and every year, in spite of the money being put into new safe tracks, these numbers are becoming worse and worse and worse. And we have to work together to stop it. So for New South Wales, and again, this is all of the states and territories where we have greyhound racing happening, we have just hit more than 10,000 injuries across Australia from January to the current date. That is a huge amount of injured dogs. Some of those injuries will be serious injuries where the dogs are then taken to another vet and killed under the off-track data. This time last year, there was 9,155 injuries. So you can see there's an increase, and this is what I'm saying, that in spite of all the money going into this industry, public money, to build so-called safer tracks that don't exist, the injuries and the deaths will continue, and they are continuing, and we are using the industry's own data to confirm that it's not working, that their strategies for safe racing aren't working. They continue to fail. They claim the rates of injury and deaths are up because there's more race meetings, and that is true, but they're also claiming they've got safer tracks, which is not true. So, for example, in New South Wales, there are 1,045 race meetings, and that is increased by 3.7%. So there's the extra racing and the extra stress on the bodies of these greyhounds. You can see in the table on the right hand of the slide that New South Wales is by far the worst state. We also have the greatest number of tracks in New South Wales, but the injuries and the deaths are going up continually in spite of what the industry is trying to do. Don't worry about, as I said, we are happy to share this information for those who are advocating for greyhounds. So you don't need to try and read every single piece of data while you're listening to me as well. We are happy to share this information. Some of the challenges that we are up against, and I think probably the biggest challenges, are government support for this industry and the politics of that. Then there's the self-regulation, and even though we have an independent regulator in New South Wales, part of their role is also to support the greyhound racing industry. So it's a bit like a double-edged sword for us. There is huge amounts of public money that goes into this industry. In New South Wales alone, over a 3-year period, $70 million of public money went straight from the government coffers to Greyhound Racing New South Wales. And then they gave them an additional $30 million for the Safe Tracks program, which is continuing to fail, where dogs are continuing to be injured or killed. The gambling industry is a huge challenge for us because they are big, they are powerful, and they continue to do deals with greyhound racing and horse racing and harness racing. One example is Ladbroke have done a deal with Greyhound Racing New South Wales so that every greyhound track in New South Wales will be painted basically red with the white Ladbroke signage on there, because they see that as an advertising thing or a marketing thing to show their power. But tackling the greyhound industry is something we absolutely need to do, and something that is going to continue to challenge us. It's one of our biggest challenges. The other challenge is that while around the world, and Australia is only one of 7 countries where greyhound racing is continuing, and around the world tracks are continuing to close, the US, where there's been incredible and effective advocacy and campaigning for a long period of time, they've only got 2 tracks left to close. But here in Australia, we have more than 50% of the world's greyhound tracks, and New South Wales, far and above any other state and territory, has the most. In spite of that, because of the gambling revenue, Greyhound Racing New South Wales are wanting to build more and more tracks, and I'll talk about that a little bit further on. So that is a huge challenge. We're bad enough as it is in New South Wales with more tracks than anywhere else, and we still have to fight new ones as well. The other thing that is a challenge, but I think something we can get on top of, is there is still an attitude out there that greyhounds are not necessarily companion animals or dogs, that they're racing machines. We need to swing that around. It's a very different attitude and acceptance of these beautiful dogs in places like America, where they're treasured and valued and loved. And they're certainly treasured and valued and loved here by dog lovers, but the industry and those that are gambling on these dogs don't necessarily equate a greyhound with a normal dog that would live in the family home. The industry's own greyhound rescue, rehabilitation and rehoming arms are continuing to fail. When we look at their successful rescues and rehomes compared with our amazing volunteer self-funded groups, the volunteer groups are absolutely outgunning the industry's own groups. And this is in spite of many, many millions of dollars the industry rescue groups get to accommodate what they're doing. You can see by the map that the issue with public money is not just New South Wales, it's Australia-wide, and this incredible piece of graphic, we thank the Coalition for all the work they've done in putting these numbers together. This is one piece of work that I rely on heavily when I'm lobbying members of Parliament and the industry. And you can go onto the Coalition's website, and each of the monetary amounts, you can hold your cursor over that monetary amount, and it will bring up the individuals of where that money came from, the date it came from. It's an incredible piece of work. So we thank the Coalition again. In terms of recent exposures, most of you will have seen at least one headline or something on television, but I just want to recap this because it's important, because from these exposures, we've got investigations happening and we've got inquiries happening. So as tragic and distressing as they all have been, it is moving us forward in terms of advocacy for the greyhounds. So the first headline, you know, the greyhound trainer handling dogs years after a live baiting scandal. This is one of the most extraordinary cases I've come across that we picked up in our own data tracking, where the case has gone on and on and on for years. And there was a court case involved as well. But instead of the industry removing this person from having any access to greyhounds owned by other people, they didn't. And this person who had been involved in live baiting and was found guilty of that continued to train greyhounds and handle greyhounds and manage greyhounds. That's how appallingly bad the regulation of this industry is. The other headline, horror footage of greyhounds kicked, beaten. This was the footage that came out, the first sort of bad footage that came out from South Australia, and most of you will have seen something, and we thought better than replaying it tonight, because it is very distressing, with greyhounds cowering and having the boots stuck in and being belted and trying to hide, and this person chasing them and cornering them and then beating them again. One of the exposures that probably I was most pleased with was the ones that have come about from the work from Animal Liberation Tasmania, in the footage of Anthony Bullock's property and the way he houses his dogs. Now, Anthony Bullock has been around forever, and he is also involved with horses. And some time back, my colleague and I, Alex and I, lodged an objection when he tried to get planning approval for his property to make it a legal dog training and holding place. So he'd been operating for a couple of decades with no planning approval in place, and then decided, oh, I better get a permit. And it was basically rubber stamped by the council involved. So when, and he has been notoriously involved in allegations for many, many years about animal cruelty, not just with the greyhounds, but also with the horses. We certainly, in our objection to him getting a planning permit, we certainly made reference to information provided to us that the horses that he was buying up from sale yards, or the horses he was discarding himself, we were aware were being slaughtered in his front paddock to feed the greyhounds. So this is the nature of this person. Then in the footage that Animal Lib Tasmania exposed, it showed what appeared to be a native species in a trailer. So immediately the investigation turned from just the welfare of how his greyhounds were being housed to live baiting. Now, those investigations have concluded. He has been banned for life. And further to that, the council who'd previously rubber stamped his property permit are withdrawing that. And the other thing that is happening is that this guy was always referred to as the leading trainer in Tasmania. So all of the prizes and gold cups and certificates and ribbons he's won are all going to be one by one removed from him. So that is a good thing. So the horror that came out of South Australia with both live baiting and the abuse of individual greyhounds has forced a state government inquiry there. The horror that's come out of the Anthony Bullock greyhound for property and other properties that have also been exposed by Animal Lib Tasmania has led and continues to force the government to look and review these things. So in spite of the horror, it is leading to a path of investigation and lifting the lid of transparency. That is really important, and that's a positive. A couple of very important surveys, one was a survey, one was a poll, that have been undertaken and we can use as advocates. And some of you may be aware of the Coalition and the Grey 2K worldwide survey. These were very dedicated, independent surveys. This wasn't just picking up the phone and asking somebody questions. They have absolutely smack of integrity. So the first one confirmed that 57% of Australians oppose greyhound racing. So we have to ask, why are our governments still supporting it? And that 69% of those surveyed, and these are all Australian citizens, oppose taxpayer money going into supporting the industry. More recently, a Tasmanian poll was commissioned, again run independently, and that confirmed 62% of respondents said they oppose greyhound racing, with 46% opposing it strongly. A small percentage, 15%, were in favour of public money. 45% of people said they weren't, and they would consider changing how they voted if the party they were supporting didn't promise to stop supporting the industry. These figures continue to go up. The more awareness we raise, the more exposures, the more damning our campaigns are against the industries and targeting the decision makers at state and federal government level, the more these numbers will go up. Just wanted to touch briefly on how important it is for us to all stay one ahead of what is our opposition, and that's the greyhound industry. We do that several ways. So we collaborate with groups like the Coalition and a number of other incredible advocacy groups across Australia and overseas who share their information as we share our information with them, and it works really well. We also continue to educate and raise awareness at every opportunity. And if it's a presentation like this, it is including stories about greyhounds in our member magazines. And we have a beautiful story in our end of year magazine about 2 precious greyhounds called Jasper, who recently was given his wings, and his greyhound sister Pumpkin. And it is a lovely story. We also monitor and report on everything. For every action that we pulled together at Animal Liberation for our greyhound campaign, there would be 50 to 100 things going on in the background that most people never hear about, and hundreds of emails to get to a point where we can do something. We participate ongoing in government submission opportunities and provide evidence where we're invited. Animal Lib was invited to the federal inquiry into greyhound exports, and I presented to that Senate committee for animal liberation, and it was a very positive experience because I was surrounded by other greyhound advocates and we were all absolutely on the same page. Now, while the government has chosen not to ban greyhound exports, we made a lot of noise. We raised awareness with a lot of MPs, and we will get there eventually. Sometimes it takes a number of steps. We are also tracking everything the greyhound racing industry does. And I just want to go through, this is some of the work that we've now been able to do because Mitchell, one of our volunteers, came forward and is helping me with a lot of things in the background that I just haven't had time to do. So the disciplinary actions that GWIC takes is after there's been an investigation, a penalty has been applied to the participant, they've had the opportunity to appeal. So these decisions are final decisions. So when the industry says it's just a few bad apples, we say your own data is saying that between January and October this year, 93 bad apples, New South Wales participants, have breached your own rules and regulations of greyhound racing to a total of 125 times. And you can see the top reference is predominantly they're still drugging dogs. There are also some other heinous charges. One involved a sexual abuse type matter against another a worker at a greyhound track, and these are all public documents. So we are tracking, Mitchell tracks these investigations and final outcomes, and we have been publishing them every month, and we just keep adding up the total. So when they tell you they've reformed, you look at the injuries, you look at the death rates, you look at their own investigations of their own participants, and the data keeps telling us nothing's changed. They can't reform, they're refusing to reform. The new tracks, and this work will probably dominate what we do with greyhounds next year, is going to be opposing a suite of new tracks. Some of them are complete new greyhound racing venues. Some of them are just an additional track. The first one is Tweed. That is going to be, and they're calling all of them a centre of excellence. It's like a brand name, I think. So Tweed Shire Council will be 2 tracks, a round track and a straight track, and a whole new venue with grandstands and kennels and all sorts of things. That is still with the state government planning and environment department, because the Greyhound Club concerned is trying to have it listed as a state significant development, I think, to make it harder for us to challenge. Then we have, and this one's been really interesting over the last few weeks, there is still a bit of a media circus going on. So there is a fight between Bathurst Regional Council and Orange City Council about who's going to get a new greyhound track. And again, this will be a complete track, a complete venue, probably with 2 tracks, I suspect an oval and a straight track and a whole lot of other things. What has been concerning about the Bathurst or Orange Council new greyhound track is that in both instances, both councils are willing to sell off what is public land. In the case of Bathurst, part of the old racetrack, which a local go-kart club want for the kids and go-karts. And in Orange, council and we suspect they've done it. They've certainly entered some sort of in-principle deal, trying to sell off what was the old trotting track for horses, harness racing track. And I suspect in the end it's going to be Orange that wins this battle. But over the last few weeks, Orange Council have had a number of closed meetings. I have spoken at one of those council meetings. The last meeting, I wasn't given that opportunity because council withheld from their business papers that they were even going to discuss it. So I have certainly raised a formal complaint with the councillors and the general manager, and I've told them I'm going to raise it with the minister as well, because if they're selling off public land, our view is the public need to have some input about what happens to that land when there are so many more uses that can be made. We also have a new track that will be presenting in the near future under Wollongong City Council, and that is a brand new venue. Again, I expect 2 tracks, 1 oval, 1 straight at Dapto. There is already a Dapto greyhound racing track, but there's a lease arrangement that's coming to an end. So the club and Greyhound Racing New South Wales spent $3 or $4 million buying more land, and they're going to build another track. Wentworth Park is under a lease arrangement, and that expires, I think it's 2027. So they will already be on the hunt for more land to build another city type greyhound racing venue. The Mid Coast Council, and this relates to Taree, excuse me, wanting to put in another track on an existing venue. And then Kempsey Shire Council, our understanding is, again, the local Greyhound Club, or Greyhound Racing New South Wales in particular, want to put in an additional track on an existing facility. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 campaigns we will be running. This is where we need help. We also want to do some work on initiating a campaign that greyhounds are companion animals, to start getting that public mindset to change. That beautiful banner over on the right is Animal Lib's banner, and we will be, for all of these campaigns, getting additional banners made up that can be used in those local communities. This is one we had made up for Tweed, and we'll have to have a look at what we do for other areas. Finally, how can you help? As I said, one of the biggest challenges we're going to have in 2024 is all of the new greyhound tracks. We need to build armies of compassionate people that love greyhounds, hate public money being wasted, like advocating for justice in all of those areas, be it Dapto or Orange or Bathurst or Tweed, so that we've got people on the ground who can write letters to the paper, who can email their councillors, who can go to a council meeting and stand up and speak for the greyhounds. And when I say we need these people, rest assured, every step of the way, myself and Animal Liberation will be there backing you up. If you speak at council, we will speak at council. If you need help drafting what you want to present, we will help you draft that. And if that means putting together packs for everybody to present to their local councillors, I will happily invest time in doing that. What we need to do is also we need you to stay across our work. Keep watching our social media sites and the coalition social media sites so that you are taking in the injuries and the death rates, so that when you're talking to somebody, you've got up-to-date, accurate information. And that includes about whatever's going on in your own region where there may be greyhound racing. You can send an email to your local MP putting up logical reasons for why we need to end this. And again, if anybody needs help, I'm very happy to assist with that. You can offer to volunteer with us. I have both Andrew and Mitchell helping me with Greyhound work and some other work. It's not enough. There is so much Greyhound work alone to do next year. We need more volunteers. So anybody that has a few hours a week, maybe a few hours a fortnight, please approach us. And we'd love to have a chat with you about your skills and what you'd like to do, where your interests are, and everything you do will help us run successful campaigns. We need more help. We need more people. You can also, those that are in a position to do so, can donate to our campaign so we can get those beautiful banners made. We can get flyers made to stop these tracks. So there's a whole range of things you can do, including we have a pledge on our website, never to bet on a greyhound. The more people that add their name to that, the more we can lobby the decision makers. Thank you very much for your attention. Happy to share anything, happy to work with anybody. If you can, maybe not till after the Christmas New Year period, but anybody that's got a few hours a fortnight to help work with me and Mitchell and our team to bring an end to this horrible, horrible industry, we would welcome you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was a phenomenal presentation, and your knowledge is nothing short of extraordinary. It was fantastic. Thank you so much. Very lucky to have you on our team.